for example, and then you write it just from memory. And, that seems so simple to you, but for a first grader who's just or a kindergarten child who's just learning to first make those letters, hiding it presents a challenge. And then motor learning strategies, which are really about practice and reinforcement for the most part. So then, these are ideas that we got off from a variety of places, but we decided to adopt this method in our instruction. One thing is, I don't know, do you know if your schools use Denilian or Zener-Bloser? Or it's something else? They use Denilian? Oh, different. Combination, yeah, which is what Ohio is, where we can't figure it out. That Denilian is not a good idea for many of our children that are struggling to learn handwriting because it's too fancy and it's got little curly cues and it's slanted and it's confusing. Although it's supposed to be a way to launch into cursive. But there is a movement among handwriting gurus to make all your letters as a continuous stroke. And it's just easier. And the only reason, you don't even, you probably use continuous stroke. Okay, how many people still do manuscript? How many people use cursive? This is on you yourselves. How many people combine cursive and manuscript when you write? So you just do your own thing, okay. Where was the handwriting instruction when we needed it? It's fine. But I'm very old, and when we grew up, it was ball and stick. So for some reason they thought you should make a line and then attach a ball to it, and it's a B or a D. And that was how children learned to write. Now every letter should be one stroke, if at all possible. There's a couple letters that doesn't work for, like a T, but makes sense that it would be easier to learn that way. Then there is a developmental sequence, and that is Handwriting Without Tears uses a wonderful developmental sequence. And it's kind of a combination of the simplest strokes to strokes that are, like loops, to letter, how often is the letter used. So like the verbs, are pushed, not the verbs. What is, I just forgot what A's and E's are. Thank you. I think I teach handwriting. Early on. The other thing we did, because you've now heard that the verbal cueing is important, we adopted a consistent language for teaching. And I've heard the group of students that has been teaching handwriting to disadvantaged children use the same approach. So we, certain letters were tallies, certain letters were smallies, certain letters were basement letters. The ones that had more of a diagonal went down and up the slide. And it was important, particularly Tolly and Smalley, because it helped children understand the sizing and understand how to put it above a liner and kind of keep that in mind as they're forming the letter. Okay, so how do we put this together? We decided we would use lots of reinforcement with some immediate feedback by adults, sometimes correcting, sometimes just praising. We figured out a couple different ways for children to self-evaluate. Mostly we used circle your best letter, or we would have conversations with them. Boy, you are really doing well with your H's. Which one do you like the best, or which one is the best one to you? Just to get them to revisit which ones they think are more legible. You'll see how we broke down into small groups to give more feedback. And we immediately gave them opportunities to generalize what they were learning in handwriting to a writing process, writing stories. And then we also know, just based on some more correlational studies, that visual motor integration is important to this, as well as coordination, obviously. There's a huge cognitive component to handwriting, and that we had to really work to engage the children, which I think we did very well. And I don't know that I guess I'll go I won't do it now. We have a website. I encourage you to go to the website and look at our program. Okay, so that was kind of our principles. Now, one other little thing I'll just talk quickly about is what motivated us from current practice. And so in the context of most of the time in Columbus, Ohio and Central Ohio, children still get pull-out services. It would be maybe practicing one-on-one with a child on handwriting. We give recommendations to the teacher, but we're not very often in the classroom, so we don't really know if they'll fit or they'll work. And also, when you give recommendations, but you're not often in the classroom, you can't really monitor how things are working, and that limits you in making suggestions for adapting your recommendation. And then we also miss out on opportunities to identify kids that are right on the border. They may be headed for illegible handwriting when the writing demands increase. So this is what we did, and it's got quite a few components, but I think they make sense, and I encourage you to do something like this when you're out in practice. So we are wonderful collaborators. That's just kind of core to who we are. And so this was a co-teaching intervention, and we partnered with the teachers in planning, in reviewing, and in implementing the program. And I'll explain how we did that. And then we designed specific components related to the students' learning. Instruction, what was the intervention, what did practice look like, what did evaluation look like. And we specifically divided a class of, the classes were like 22, 23, 24 children. And this program was implemented by 3 adults, and so we split them up into groups of 6 to 8. Well, 7 to 8. And there were children on IEPs in these classrooms, and we did have specific interventions for those children that were embedded in what we were doing with the kids. And then we always had handwriting sessions and writing sessions. And kind of intuitively you would think OT more directed the handwriting part and teachers more directed the writing part. So co-teaching is actually a model. It's out there. It has some research behind it. It was never developed for OT and teachers. It was developed. You have to be aware of this when you go out and practice, is that teachers will talk about being interdisciplinary, and what they mean is they work with special ed. So regular ed teachers work with a special ed teacher. There's only 2 people in this team. Well, it's not true universally, but it was a model developed for special ed to be embedded with regular education. But it could very well work with OT and education as well. And the goal is to really provide your interventions more completely and fully in the classroom with the teachers. Make sense? Then the other model we used is called station teaching. And it just means that we had small groups, and then there would be one adult kind of running that group. Everybody would be doing related activities or even the same activity, but there would be one adult. And there's so many advantages to that. Think you're trying to do writing and handwriting, so there's an adult right there to kind of see what you're doing, give some feedback, monitor what's going on, encourage, cue, prompt. It isn't ideal. Ideal, I think, would be one adult for maybe 2 or 3 kids. But it's certainly better than thinking, what can I do with these 22 kids in front of me, and I'm trying to give them some individualized feedback. So the children became very engaged in these small groups, and it really worked out for a nice collaboration of teachers and OTs. And so the 3 adults that ran the program were the teacher of the classroom, a specialist who's essentially special ed in Ohio, and they're called specialists, and then the OT. So this is what the program was. We had 2 sessions a week, and each was 45 minutes. It ran for 12 weeks, so it ran for the whole autumn semester of the students' first grade year. It was with first graders just as they came into the school. And what we taught was the 26 lowercase letters. And the reason why we didn't really teach uppercase at all is they had learned that in kindergarten. And so that was, we were kind of building on previous skill of the students. And every single week, the children would do a timed work sample, a writing sample. And that writing sample we would look at those to guide what we were going to do the next week. So here's our research-built program. Actually, the preparation was a little difficult because we had to figure out how to get kids into groups very quickly. And what we decided to do, we organized them by color. So there was a white, blue, and red group, and they initially were given cards to get into their group. And then after a while, they knew what group they were in. So, and what we did is, the groups stayed the same, and we rotated with the different activities. The adults rotated, and it's important you think about an efficient way to get kids into groups. And we actually scientifically picked the groups. But how do you pick? Do you pick low kids here and high kids here, middle kids here? No, that's not the OT way. You're right. So we mixed it up with high and low together because the high would model for the low, and that was how we formed our groups. So then I will show you each of these components. Terry, who implemented the program, would actually introduce 2 letters each week, sometimes 3, and then talk about how you form it, what it looks like, what are the cues for remembering it. She's very simple and at their level in terms of language. And she would model repeatedly. We had a smartboard but you could use a whiteboard in front of the whole class. And then all the students had a small whiteboard with lines, and they would practice right after the instruction. And there wasn't a lot of feedback about that initial practice. And then the first session of the week, they would get into their small groups. Well, they would already be in them. Then we would move to small group activity, and some kids would be working on motor planning and kind of more the coordination aspect. Some kids would be working on cognitive strategies and practicing those letters using cognitive strategies, which was kind of sometimes doing a hunt for the letter in a bunch of letters. It was hiding the letter. It was beginning to write words that were missing the letter, so there would be words and they would fill in the letter. And then there was a visual motor group, which was more about mazes and cutting and doing bubble letters and bubble words. And so all the kids would rotate to all the groups. Each kid would do each activity. And then the second session of the week was more about, let's link this to writing. So they would be asked to recall the letters they'd learned and do more practice, and then they would do their work sample so that we would know how their legibility was coming. And the work sample was a sentence that they had to write repeatedly for 2 minutes that would really emphasize those particular letters. And then they would do writing workshop, and this is where we leaned on the teachers to help us integrate the first grade curriculum. And I don't know if you know much about the first grade curriculum, but if you do work in the schools, it's really, really important to understand the curriculum standards for each grade. And so with first grade, sometimes they begin just by writing letters into, we have word walls? Do you have word walls? So there's words on the wall, and children have to pick them and copy them or use them in sentences, and the word walls change. And they seem to prefer word wall, maybe because it was a group activity too. They also had their words of the week in their desk. That was a book where they kept their words of the week. But after that, students start to write a letter. One of the first things they did was they wrote a letter home. And then from there, they do start their stories. And the end of writing workshop, by the end of the 12 weeks, was writing a book with